The rescued Bobcat wouldn't stop howling at the hallway closet, scratching, pacing, screaming like something was trapped inside. When the cops finally pried the wall open, they found a crawl space no one knew existed and the tiny shoe of a long-lost child. But what they uncovered next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Hannah froze, her hand resting flat against the plywood panel. The draft brushing across her skin was wrong, too cold, too focused. She leaned in, inspecting the surface now with trained eyes. The grain of the wood shifted subtly along the left edge, and though the paint matched perfectly with the rest of the interior, there was an unevenness to it, an imperfection no one would notice unless they were looking for it. But Scout had noticed. The Bobcat's agitation grew as she pressed her palm firmly against the seam. He paced now, circles tight and sharp, his claws tapping the hardwood with an urgency that made the hair rise on the back of her neck. Thomas watched from behind, his mouth parted slightly, one hand still gripping the handle of his cane like it was the only thing anchoring him to the present. "I swear to you," he murmured, voice catching in his throat, "there's nothing there. I sealed this wall myself, long before Scout even came along. There's no crawl space, no void. I'd have known." But Hannah wasn't listening anymore. Something in Scout's behavior spoke louder than words, something ancient and uncanny. He wasn't confused. He wasn't afraid. He knew. With a sudden motion, she drew her multi-tool from her belt and slipped the flathead tip into the crease. With a soft pop, the edge gave slightly. Paint cracked like brittle eggshell, flaking in thin white veins. Behind her, Scout crouched low, shoulders rippling, his breath shallow and quick. The air around them had shifted, gone still. Even Thomas, as skeptical as he was terrified, could sense it. As the panel loosened, a sour scent drifted out, faint but distinct. Hannah stiffened. It wasn't mold. It wasn't wood rot. It was something older, deeper, like dust and rust and the inside of something that should never have been sealed. She slid the panel aside with controlled caution, but the space beyond was swallowed in darkness. Not an inch of insulation. No wires, no storage alcove, just black. And in that black, a metallic clink. Hannah stepped back instinctively, pulling her flashlight from her belt. Her heart began to pound, not from fear, not yet, but from the unmistakable certainty that she was standing at the threshold of something wrong, something buried. Scout let out a low, almost mournful growl, and Thomas, still gripping his cane, whispered as though to himself, "Ben always said he needed a place to be alone. Said some things were better left behind walls." The silence that followed was so dense it seemed to coat the walls. Dust floated in slow motion through the shaft of Hannah's flashlight, illuminating the narrow passage that had no right to exist. The crawl space was only 3 feet deep, maybe 2 feet high, with rough wooden beams framing it like a crude coffin. The air that oozed from the opening was still and ancient, filled with the kind of dry rot that clung to the nose and refused to leave. But beneath the decay was something sharper, an undercurrent of rusted iron and something Hannah refused to name. Kyle knelt beside her, jaw tight, the thermal camera forgotten in his hand. His breath hitched as her flashlight beam settled on the object nestled half-buried in the compacted dirt floor. A small, worn sneaker. Child-sized. Once white, now a patchwork of mold and time. The toe was scuffed raw. Just beside it, almost hidden by the fabric folds of a tattered pink blanket, lay the fine, ivory arc of a rib cage. Hannah's stomach turned, but her hands didn't shake. She had seen death before, gruesome, fresh, violent. But this was different. This was secret. The kind of secret that walls were built to silence. She leaned in, carefully, respectful of the stillness, and pulled the flashlight away from the blanket's edge. The pattern was faded but unmistakable. Dancing unicorns, now barely visible, once cheerful and bright. Thomas Avery stepped back as if struck. His face had drained of all color, his fingers twitching around the crook of his cane. "No," he said, voice barely audible. This isn't right. That wall. Ben never said anything about this." "Did he ever bring anyone here?" Hannah asked, her voice low but firm, trying to tether them to the moment. "Any kids? Family friends? Visitors?" Thomas blinked as though waking from a trance. "No, he was quiet. After the divorce, he just kept to himself. Spent all his time in the shop or working on the house." "Who poured the concrete in the subfloor?" "Ben. He handled the inner walls. Said he wanted to add storage. I didn't ask questions. We were grieving. Our mother had just passed." Kyle's voice cracked the silence like a dry twig. "You think someone built this to hide a child?" Hannah didn't answer. She didn't have to. Scout sat at the opening, his gold eyes fixed on the blanket, utterly still, not growling, not pacing, as if he understood. Hannah sat alone in the dining room, the coroner's report spread open before her like a wound. The clinical language did nothing to blunt its contents. Juvenile female, approximate age 4, skeletal remains consistent with prolonged concealment. No antemortem fractures, no clear cause of death. But the smallness of the bones, the brittle silence of them, spoke louder than any paragraph. Thomas hadn't said a word in hours. He sat in his recliner near the window, eyes glazed, staring past the empty pasture where Scout's enclosure shimmered in the afternoon light. The Bobcat had quieted since the discovery. No more mewling, no more frantic pacing. Just stillness, like a sentinel relieved of duty. Kyle stood near the hall, flipping through old property records retrieved from the county archive. "No permits for internal renovations in '96, he said. "No contractors listed. This crawl space, it was never supposed to exist. Your brother built it with his own hands." Thomas's jaw clenched. Ben wasn't like that. He was strange sometimes, private. But he was good to people, quiet. He helped the neighbors fix their fences, volunteered at the chapel. He wasn't a monster. "Monsters rarely look the part," Hannah said, not unkindly. "That closet was sealed for nearly 30 years, and whoever she was, no one came looking. No one filed a report. No one asked." Thomas rubbed his hands through his hair, breathing shallowly. "I didn't know. I swear to you. I didn't know about a foster kid. He told me everything, I thought. After the divorce, he was broken. I thought he was just getting back on his feet. He never mentioned a girl." Hannah's voice lowered. "People can hide unimaginable things, Tom. Even from those closest to them. Especially from them." In the background, Scout stretched beneath the window, his body languid, but his eyes watchful. When the wind shifted, he lifted his head, ears twitching, and looked toward the house. Not at it, but through it. Toward that wall. The pieces were converging now, quietly, without spectacle. A dead child, unnamed. A brother with secrets and tools and silence. A wall that shouldn't exist. And a wild animal who, against all logic, refused to let it stay hidden. Hannah folded the report and stood. The truth wasn't just beneath the floorboards. It had soaked into the very foundation of the house, waiting, festering, until instinct tore it loose. The cemetery was quiet the morning of Emily Dawson's memorial. No breeze stirred the pale grass. No birdsong dared fill the silence. Only the soft crunch of worn shoes on gravel and the gentle creak of the old iron gate accompanied the small procession. Thomas Avery stood alone at the front, a man hollowed by revelation, His shoulders stooped not from age, but from the unbearable weight of a truth he never chose but now carried like a penance. In his hand, he held a single white lily. It trembled. Beside the small, newly carved headstone, just 2 lines. Emily Dawson, 1993 to 1997. A light remembered. Scout lay motionless. The Bobcat's coat, a mix of gold and rust, shimmered in the morning light like something from a half-remembered myth. His body curved around the base of the stone as if he belonged there, as if he were guarding her still. The townspeople had come in quiet waves. Some brought flowers, others held their children's hands a little tighter. Many had never known Emily, or even heard her name until the news broke. But now, her absence felt personal, tangible. A ghost had been exhumed not from the ground, but from their shared indifference. And guilt had seeped in, not from wrongdoing, but from all the years they hadn't known to look. Reporters asked questions, but most were too shaken for answers. The idea that a bobcat, had accomplished what law enforcement and time could not unsettled people. It undid the boundaries between instinct and conscience, between wild and sacred. Thomas didn't speak during the service. His voice, once steady and warm like old timber, had eroded into a quiet rasp. But his actions said everything. He signed over the deed to his land that same week, transforming it into the Emily Dawson Wildlife Sanctuary. It would be open to school groups, conservation efforts, and quiet hikers seeking something unnameable among the trees. Hannah stood at the edge of the service, watching Scout with something between reverence and disbelief. "We thought we rescued him," she murmured to Kyle. "But he's the one who brought her home." Scout remained by Emily's grave for nearly 48 hours without food or rest. Only when the moon rose a second time did he finally rise, stretch, and return to Thomas's porch, curling beneath the rocker like nothing had changed. But everything had. Emily had been found. A name had been spoken. A silence had been broken, and in the stillness that followed it was clear. Justice hadn't arrived in a badge or a courtroom. It came on 4 silent paws and a voice the wild never forgot.